This week in wrestling headlines, Daton Fix returned to the mat, Penn State and Michigan put on quite an exciting duel, and Jake Wentzel upset number 1 Mekhi Lewis. But does that win actually count? Let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to this segment of Wrestling Headlines right here on the Fanco Wrestling YouTube channel, where we discuss everything going on in the world of college wrestling. And this weekend was super exciting. I have a lot to talk about on this version of the show, with Daton Fix getting 3 big pins over the weekend, Carter Sirachi upsetting Logan Massa. I mean, that was quite a duel, and so much more to talk about. So let's talk about the first topic of the day, the first segment, which was Daton Fix pinned his way to the Cowboy Challenge tournament. So there was an exciting Cowboy Challenge tournament over the weekend with Okie State, West Virginia, Mizzou that happened, and Wyoming. They're the ones who actually really looked good this weekend, crowning 4 champions. But the big news is that Daton Fix is actually returning. So I kind of assumed that this was going to happen over the weekend, considering the fact that Daton Fix's suspension was up. His 1-year suspension ended on February, I believe, 12th, and this tournament happened on February 14th. So he was able to get his 4 matches in over the weekend and will end up being in the new coaches rankings, in the new actual rankings of the weekend. He recorded 3 pins on the weekend, all the way up to the finals. He actually had an extra match before that as well. That was a tech fall. But his 3 pins were impressive, including his pin over Ryan Sullivan of West Virginia in the finals. And Sullivan, who's a top 25 ranked wrestler, has actually been looking pretty good. So it's impressive that Daton Fix returned since his first time wrestling in college since the NCAA finals against Nick Suriano. It was kind of cool to see him back here on the mat. And I'm interested to see how he's going to do throughout the duration of the rest of the season at 133 pounds. Also at this tournament was 197. At 197, Stephen Buchanan recorded his other upset against Noah Adams. And, I mean, I guess it wasn't an upset as much at this time, considering he's already beat him just a couple of weeks ago. But the big thing is he showed that this was no fluke that he beat Noah Adams. And I don't think that the match originally showed that it was a fluke. I even said that he beat him outright. But this time he beat him again 6-4. And Noah Adams, just in the round before that, actually recorded a win over AJ Ferrari, giving Ferrari his first loss of the season. So 197 pounds is just going to be an exciting weight. I mean, there's so much action there between all of these guys at 197 pounds. I'm interested to see what happens. Also with the tournament, Brock Mahler recorded a win over Boo Llewellyn in the finals, an overtime victory, and the Llewellyn's first loss of the season. And like I said, Wyoming just absolutely dominated the competition, crowning the 4 champions to Okie State's 3 and Missouri's 3. Jacob Wright at 57 won, Hayden Hastings at 74, Tate Samuelson at 84, and Buchanan at 197. Now, we'll see each of these teams compete again in the upcoming weeks at their conference championships. Big 12s are March 6th. We'll see Mizzou compete in the MAC around that same weekend. So, next up, Penn State and Michigan lived up to the hype. Now, this was a duel that came down to, we weren't really sure that we were going to get this duel because it was postponed originally. But Penn State and Michigan came together and decided that they were going to wrestle this Sunday. Now, Penn State pulled off the victory. They pulled off the victory 18-13. And really, man, I think Penn State just looked very dominant in this duel. And that's why we really need to get the Iowa and Penn State duel. So what happened in this duel? Well, first of all, before we get to the Penn State and Michigan duel, we have to talk about Michigan-Ohio State. That duel happened on Friday night and came down to the last bout between Luan and Elijah Cleary. So 16-15 going into the last bout at 157 pounds. And that match ended up going into double overtime and ultimately came down to the ride-out point, which Michigan was able to secure and ended up winning the duel against Ohio State. So that was I don't want to say unexpected, but I was pumped to watch that duel on Friday night. And Penn State and Michigan, man, I was jumping up and down the entire match, and that is no exaggeration. Penn State and Michigan, there was so much excitement here. One, Robbie Howard made his debut. There are a couple things I do want to talk about that happened in this duel. Robbie Howard made his debut for Penn State at 125 pounds. They finally have a 125-pounder. pulled off the win. Dylan Ragusin didn't wrestle at 25, but he bumped up to 133 to take on Roman Bravo Young. He actually weighed in at 129 pounds, so he weighed in a bit underweight, but tried to put on the pounds before this match against RBY. Now, RBY almost picked up the major against Ragusin, who was actually looking good in the first period, and then RBY just really put on the gas pedal and put it to him. I thought he had 2 points at the end. If you watched that match, let me know what you thought. Nick Lee looked good, as usual, and Barraclaw actually gave Candace Storr a match, but ended up losing 4-3. Brady Berge is back to form, and against Will Lewan, who ended up getting a 3-1 victory, was Brady Berge. Not really an exciting match, but Berge did end up pulling that off. And then we got into the upset realm, where we saw a few upsets in a row, including Camamine, who is, in my opinion, like even thinking before this match, I'm just thinking that he's been itching to get into the rankings and get a big breakout win. And this was the match that he got. He had a 4-1 victory over Joe Lee. He pushed the pace the whole time. These two were super exciting to watch. He got into a bunch of scrambles. I really enjoyed watching this match. But Camamine is now finally going to be in the rankings. And this is going to be another great match come Big Ten tournament time. And then we got into this was the biggest upset potentially of the weekend. But Carter Starachi beat Logan Massa in tiebreakers when he was able to, actually they went into overtime, tied up, of course, and Starachi, whenever he was on top during the ride-out, ended up getting Massa, turning him onto his back, getting back points, ended up ultimately winning the match 7-1. I mean, Starachi is just tough on top. Even with his loss earlier in the season against Washington, he just showed that he has been tough on top even during that match. And I think that now, like, this wasn't like a fluke win or anything. Like, he beat Massa, and showing that first match was, coming into college a little bit tough. His first real match in the Penn State lineup, and wow, they're going to be fireworks at Big Ten at 174. Will either of them beat Michael Kemmer? That's the question. I don't know. I don't know that they looked on Kemmer's level, but Aaron Brooks over Bullock, it came out a little bit overzealous, put up a fight. Bullock put up a fight against Brooks, but Brooks ended up winning. Miles Amin returned this weekend. He had an injured hand that happened during Friday night's dual meet against Ohio State, but Michael Beard looked good against Miles Amin, who returned at actually bumping up a weight at 197 pounds. But Beard just couldn't quite connect in the final period, couldn't quite connect on some of those shots. Amin ended up winning 8-5. And to me, 197 pounds just up for grabs. You already saw Buchanan and Adams and that craziness. Now, Amin and Beard, 197 is going to be wild. And then Mason Parris finished off the duel with a decision. Just a decision over Seth Neville. So that was actually pretty good for Neville, just losing 12-2. And ultimately, Penn State did win the dual meet victory 18-13. And it was so exciting. And then the ACC continues to shake it up. First of all, Mekhi Lewis injury defaulted to Jake Wentzel. So does this actually count as a win? So if you watch the match, you saw that Jake Wentzel was the dominant wrestler. I mean, up through the two periods that they wrestled, he injury defaulted actually at the beginning of the third period. Didn't even wrestle the third period, but Wentzel hit a takedown, hit a single leg in the first period, and actually had Mekhi's leg up in the air for like a straight minute, potentially even more, but about a minute he had him up in the air. And I mean, Mekhi, who was riding one of the longest winning streaks up until this point, he is just so darn flexible. You'll be hard pressed to find a more flexible wrestler than Mekhi Lewis, considering that Wentzel was trying his hardest to take Mekhi down for like a whole period, and ultimately did end up getting at the end of the first, and then riding out Mekhi. Now Mekhi was feeling a little bit hurt at this point, and I don't know what was going on, but the coaches actually challenged a takedown. It was a takedown, in my opinion. And then what ended up happening is Wentzel ended up riding out. He ended up riding out Mekhi through the end of the period. We got into the second. Wentzel was riding out Mekhi, and he just looked like tough on top. He was keeping Mekhi down, cross facing. Just working him on top with half, and just looking absolutely just brutal to wrestle. And he ended up, unfortunately, hurting Mekhi's shoulder. I mean, he could have had an injury before. I don't know if it was Wentzel that necessarily actually hurt him. But Mekhi came back time and time again, and I was surprised that he came back a couple of these times. During one of the injuries, after that, Wentzel was able to choose his position, ended up choosing bottom, escaped, and then was up 3-0, but ultimately Mekhi did have to injury default after the match. Coach said, that's it, we're pulling him out. We'll see what happens at the ACC. Does this match count as a win? Yes. Will the rankers count it as a win? I don't know. That's the thing. Some rankers take this into consideration. Some say, well, he injury defaulted. Mekhi could have came back. I kind of get both aspects, but I'll say this. Jake Wentzel was the dominant wrestler in that match. Also in the ACC, Virginia Tech, although they lost that match, ultimately won the duel 27-12 against Pitt, and they had an undefeated season, 9-0, with wins over NC State, North Carolina, and even WVU outside of the ACC. They looked really good this season, and I'll be the first to say that I underestimated them from the beginning of the year. Didn't think they could beat UNC. Sure as heck didn't think they could beat NC State. They proved me wrong. They proved a lot of the nation wrong. Won the ACC dual meet title outright. And this was the first undefeated season since the 1950s. How about that as a fact? And as actually their best record in school history. This should put them, in my opinion, above Michigan, who just had that loss to Penn State in the rankings, because obviously those two teams didn't get to wrestle. But with the undefeated record and their dominance over other teams, I think that they should be at number 3 in the rankings. Also in the ACC, you want to talk about craziness. My goodness, Caden Russell of Duke put an upset win over Trumbull of NC State. Again, like I said, this weight is just absolutely berserk at 197. He pinned Trumbull in the first period. He got a takedown and ended up pinning Trumbull in the first. And Russell at this point was 0-4 on the season. He had losses to Nino Bonacorsi, Giaiello, who Trumbull had beat Bonacorsi just within the past month. And Russell ends up pinning him. Is this a fluke? I don't know. It was an impressive pin by Caden Russell of Duke. Now the thing is, NC State did end up beating Duke 37-6. They crushed them. The only loss was Trumbull, but it shows that the ACC has just been insane this year. It's been one of my favorite conferences to watch. In other wrestling headlines, Navy defeated Army over the weekend in their first win over Army, which gave them the star match victory, 20-13 win, with Andrew Soniglia clinching it with a major decision at 157 pounds. There were unexpected upsets as usual in a Navy and Army dual meet, with Army's Brown defeating Jacob Kozer at 197. Again, 197. Wild. Navy finished the season 5-1 with upsets over Lehigh. That was their big upset of the year that really pushed them into the rankings. And they had a close loss to Pitt early on in the season. This is Coach Colat's first season as head coach at Navy. An impressive victory for Navy. In other news, Arizona State and Iowa State and Northern Iowa. That was a great tri-meet over the weekend. Iowa State with the win over Northern Iowa, 23-17. Big win with Laura over Deakin. Parker Keckeisen defeating Sam Colbury 4-3, and Lance Runyon defeating Julian Broderson 10-4. Kind of an unfortunate weekend for Broderson. I'll get to that in just a second. But Iowa State lost to Arizona State 20-15. A solid season for Arizona State, finishing 4-0. Going into heavyweight, this duel, Iowa State and Arizona State, was 17-15 going into heavyweight, which actually led to, in my opinion, potentially the best actually match, or the biggest upset, of the entire duel, where Colton Schultz, heavyweight, defeated Gannon Gremble. Schultz of Arizona State won that match, ended up winning the duel for the team 20-15. Also in that duel, Trey Muniz at 174 pounds defeated Julian Broderson. And Muniz also defeated Lance Runyon of Northern Iowa. Muniz has just been continuously proving himself that he should be in these rankings and that he's going to be a force to be reckoned with come the postseason. Again, like I said, Arizona State finished the season 4-0. So unfortunately, they had a lot of cancellations, a lot of postponements, which we're probably not going to see going into the rest of the year. And then Ryan Deakin, and we talked about Daton Fix return to the mat. We talked about Miles Amina return to the mat. But the other guy who returned to the mat this weekend was Ryan Deakin of Northwestern. My next question is, where's Suriano? Where's Michich? Are they going to be returning? I have my doubts at this point in the season. But Deakin teched Garrett Model of Wisconsin, who is with his first big return to the mat this weekend against Wisconsin. He also had to win a decision in extra matches, and just he's back. It's good to see these guys back coming into the postseason. I'm interested to see what we're going to see the rest of the year. We have a couple duels in the upcoming weeks, but for the most part, we're going to be getting into the conference championships, and we know sparks are going to fly everywhere. In Big 10 and ACC and Big 12, what are you looking the most forward to, and what was your favorite match or duel of last weekend?